Hi, I'm Amelia.
My sister stole my future with a smile. That's how I always remembered it. She stood in our living room, her nails painted the exact shade of rose gold she'd begged me to buy her, holding the acceptance letter I had dreamed about since 10th grade. It had my name on it. Well, it was supposed to. But the one in her hand was reprinted with hers, and the envelope she ripped open like it meant nothing was stamped with the name of the most prestigious art school in our state. She had never once mentioned wanting to go there. I'd spent years building a portfolio, attending free weekend workshops, saving every dollar from tutoring to cover application fees. My parents knew. She knew. But somehow, when the scholarship letter arrived, she was the one packing her bags. I was 17 and still believed that betrayal had to look like a knife or a scream. But hers came with soft eyes and carefully planned timing. My mom had found out I applied behind their backs. She said I should have consulted the family first. That scholarships weren't enough to cover everything. That we couldn't afford the extras, art supplies, rent, food, if I moved to another city. She asked how I thought that would make my sister feel, always being compared. I asked why it was always me who had to dim down to protect her. No one answered. 2 weeks later, they submitted my portfolio under her name. They didn't even spell one of the titles right. I found out by accident. An email I wasn't supposed to see. Confirmation that my art submission had been received. But the name attached wasn't mine. It was hers. I remember reading it 3 times, wondering if maybe I had typed something wrong during application season. But I knew every form I filled out. Every essay. Every caption. Every upload. My stomach dropped, not with anger, but with something worse. Recognition. They had been planning this longer than I'd realized. They said she needed a break. That her GPA wasn't enough for university without a creative hook. That it would help her build confidence. They said I was smart, I could go anywhere. They said I should wait a year, reapply. Maybe even help out with bills in the meantime. She had more needs. I had more time. It was just for now. I believed them because I was too stunned not to. My mouth stopped forming protests. My thoughts folded inward, quietly, like a tent collapsing. I watched her leave that fall, waving from the back seat like she'd won a prize she hadn't even wanted a month before. I stayed home and took a job shelving books at a small local library, the kind where time seemed to move slower. Dusty corners. Quiet hours. It was peaceful, but it didn't quiet the ache. Every time I alphabetized another mystery novel or fixed a torn book spine, I imagined what my dorm room might have looked like. I scrolled the school's Instagram page more times than I'd admit, trying to spot her. She posted once. Smiling, holding a sketchbook I recognized. It had my initials carved in the corner. She captioned it, "Finding my voice through art." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't explode all at once. It leaks. A little more every day. I started saving. Quietly. Secretly. $20 here. $50 from a birthday card I pretended I didn't get. I opened an online account my family didn't know about. I told myself that if I ever got the chance again, I wouldn't tell anyone. Not even her. Especially not her. A year passed. Then, 2. She came home for winter breaks with dyed hair and bags full of expensive art supplies she left lying around like trash. She never asked how I was. Never thanked me. Never even pretended to notice how hard I was working to not resent her. She got internships, gallery exposure, the kind of buzz I'd spent years dreaming about. She once said in front of everyone, "I guess talent just runs in the family," like it was a joke. Like I should be proud. But she was sloppy. The kind of messy that comes from not earning the things you hold. She stopped showing up to classes. She borrowed money from friends and ghosted them. She bounced between apartments and let rent fall behind. My parents kept bailing her out. They said she was under pressure. That city life was hard. That art was never stable. She'd figure it out. She just needed more time. The same time I was told I had too much of. I watched it all unfold like a movie I wasn't allowed to turn off. And still I saved. I taught myself photography on an old camera I bought secondhand from a retired teacher. I practiced drawing late at night when no one was watching. I created a small online profile under a fake name, posted work anonymously, and started getting followers. Not thousands, not viral, but enough. Enough to remind myself I wasn't imagining my ability. Enough to know I wasn't invisible. Not completely. 3 years after the scholarship theft, I booked a one-way ticket. No one knew. I waited until they were all out. My sister back at school, my parents visiting a cousin. I packed my bag, left a single note that said nothing and everything. I'm not waiting anymore. I took my saved money, my small online art portfolio, and the stubborn sense of self I had rebuilt piece by piece. I flew across the ocean and landed in a place where no one knew my name or my past. Where my sister wasn't stealing my face to build her own future. That first month abroad, I lived on noodles and hostel beds. But I also met people who made space for my voice. A travel blogger who asked to feature my photos. A retired couple who taught free pottery classes. A street muralist who let me paint one afternoon when he noticed me sketching on a napkin. I kept going. City to city. I sold small prints online, picked up freelance gigs, documented everything. Meanwhile, back home, her stories began to unravel. I didn't know all the details, but I saw bits. Posts disappearing. Long captions about taking a break from social media to heal. Comments from people asking for their money back. A tag video where someone called her out for stealing work.
I didn't comment.
I didn't gloat. I just watched. Because I was finally in a place where I had no reason to shout. The silence no longer hurt. It healed. In Rome, I sold my first painting at an art fair. In Lisbon, I hosted a photo walk. In Tokyo, I got interviewed for a small local magazine. They asked how I started. I said, with silence and betrayal. The translator laughed and asked if I wanted to rephrase it. I said no. I was building something she couldn't take.
Not now.
Not ever again. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't broken. And that was more than I could say for her. But I should have known the past doesn't stay quiet forever. The first email came on a rainy morning in Berlin. The subject line was just my name.
No greeting, no intro.
Just 4 words that made my stomach drop in the same way it had 3 years ago. I need your help. That's when everything started again. But this time, I wasn't the same girl who stayed silent. I didn't open the email for 2 days. I told myself it was because I was too busy. Too many client edits. Too many early trains to catch. But that wasn't true. The truth was simpler. I was scared. Not of her. Of myself. Of what part of me might still flinch at her voice. Of what it meant if she could still get through. I finally clicked it late one night, curled up in the corner of a hostel common room in Prague. The air smelled like burnt toast and someone's too strong cologne. The message was short, rushed, like it had been written in a moment of panic. She said things were falling apart. That she knew what she did. That she wasn't asking for money, just advice. A line at the bottom stuck out like a splinter. You're the only one who's ever fixed anything. I didn't reply. But I didn't delete it either. 2 weeks passed. Then another email. Longer this time. Full of half-explained breakdowns. Debt she hadn't told our parents about. Burned bridges, landlords, lost clients, a gallery that dropped her without notice. She said she missed me. That she thought about what she did. That she knew she didn't deserve kindness, but didn't know where else to turn. I didn't cry. I felt tired. Not bitter, not angry. Just a quiet weight. It would have been easier if she'd just asked for money again. But this wasn't that. This was a slow unraveling, and I could hear the desperation in every word. I didn't know what made me respond. Maybe it was guilt, or curiosity, or the tiniest hope that maybe, just maybe, she was finally facing the truth. I asked her one question. What exactly do you want from me? Her reply came less than an hour later. She said she didn't know. That she was scared. That she'd lost who she was. That she couldn't even draw anymore. That everything reminded her of me, because deep down, she knew none of it was hers to begin with. That should have felt like closure. But it didn't. Because then she said something else. something that made my skin crawl. She said she'd told people we were twins, that we'd always shared everything, that the art had been collaborative, that I had opted out. She said it was a harmless lie, meant to buy her time until she figured out how to fix it. But the lie had grown. She had built entire connections based on it. Entire contracts. Whole interviews where she spoke in we when she meant me. She'd blurred the lines so well, people thought my name was hers, or that I was a stage name she used early in her career. I wasn't just erased. I was consumed. Suddenly, all the moments I dismissed as paranoia snapped into focus. A comment under one of my recent travel photos. Wow, so glad you're back creating again. A DM from a gallery asking about our upcoming series. Even a brief message from a stranger asking if I was going to speak at a conference I'd never heard of. I hadn't realized it then, but she wasn't fading.
She was merging
with me. I booked a ticket home that night. Not because I missed them. Not because I wanted revenge. But because sometimes the only way to separate the truth from the lie is to hold both in the same room. When I arrived, the house felt smaller than I remembered. The walls had the same chipped paint, the same crooked family photo near the stairs. My mother acted like nothing had happened. She hugged me with a stiffness I remembered well. My dad said I looked tired, then asked how long I was staying. No one mentioned Art. Or her. She wasn't home. Not yet. She was staying with a friend, they said. But her stuff was there. Scattered in the guest room. Expensive sketch pads untouched. A box of unopened mail. A credit card bill peeking from the edge, with more zeros than I wanted to count. Later that night, I checked her old bedroom. That's where I found it. A folder. Labeled press. Inside, printed interviews, portfolio prints, a copy of my old scholarship letter with her name photoshopped over mine. And then, what broke me, a magazine feature. Full page. A photo of her standing in front of my very first mural. The one I painted on a community wall back when I was 17. She'd posted a cropped photo years ago, but I didn't know she'd used it like this. The caption said, "This piece represents my early struggle to find voice in a family that didn't understand me." I laughed. Actually laughed. Loud and sharp and ugly. That mural had saved me. I had painted it the day I learned she was leaving for school with my scholarship. I poured every bit of anger and betrayal into that wall. And now she was standing in front of it like a war hero. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. But I took the folder. The next morning she showed up. She looked thinner. Paler. Her hair grown out, dark roots showing. She smelled like old perfume and exhaustion. She saw me sitting at the kitchen table with the folder open and froze. I didn't say anything. I just slid the magazine toward her. She didn't reach for it. Just stood there, arms folded, eyes unreadable. Then, softly, she said, "I'm sorry. But apologies don't work like bandages. You can't slap one over a 3-year theft and expect the wound to disappear." Still, I said, "Okay." Not because it was okay, but because there was nothing else to say. That week was strange. We hovered near each other, like shadows. She asked about my travels. I gave her pieces, not the whole. She offered to help cook dinner one night and burn the rice. We laughed. It felt real. But so had her betrayal. Once. One evening, I walked into the living room and found her crying. Quietly. Not the dramatic kind. The kind where the body folds in on itself. She told me she couldn't pay her rent anymore. That no one would hire her. That every time she submitted a new piece, someone came forward with proof she'd faked her resume. That the internet had started noticing. She showed me her inbox. Dozens of messages. Some polite. Some brutal. All the same message. The truth was catching up. Then she asked me something I wasn't ready for. She asked if I'd let her use my name again just once. To clear up the confusion. She said it would make things easier. That people would stop asking questions if I just said we'd collaborated. That I could take credit for the next project too. That it would help both of us. I stared at her for a long time. Then I stood up. Walked to my bag. Took out a small envelope. Inside, a contract. A grant offer. One I had received in Tokyo. A major museum wanted to fund a year-long exhibit, mine, not hers. I slid it across the table. I told her if she ever used my name again, I would not only reject the grant, I'd go public. Every screenshot, every email, every interview she faked.
She didn't speak.
Just nodded. The smallest, most broken nod I've ever seen. 2 months later, I was back in Europe. The exhibit opened in Paris. My name on the wall. My voice in the audio guide. My work, finally unshadowed. A journalist asked about my journey. I said only this. My story used to be silent. Now it's mine. My sister? She went quiet. Deleted old posts. Changed usernames. Moved in with a friend from school. I don't know if she's okay. I don't know if she changed. I'm not even sure I care. But last week I got a package. No return address. Inside, a sketchbook. My old one. The cover cracked. Pages worn. A sticky note on the front. It was always yours. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I booked my next flight. The world was still open. My name's still mine. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't running. I was choosing. I thought the sketchbook was her last word. A silent goodbye. A quiet attempt at repair without asking for anything in return. I kept it on a shelf for a few days, unopened, like a truce I wasn't sure I was ready to accept. Then one evening, while rain whispered against the window of my flat in Barcelona, I pulled it down. I didn't expect much. Just old pages. But what I found made my stomach flip. Inside were sketches, some mine copied from my old work, but others I didn't recognize. Pages full of attempts. Failed anatomy. Half-rendered shadows. A note scrawled between 2 pencil drawings, trying to remember how to start from nothing. There was a desperation in her lines, but something honest too. She wasn't stealing anymore. She was learning. Or, at least trying to. And yet, just when I thought she was retreating quietly from the stage she'd borrowed, I got another email. Not from her. From a gallery assistant in New York. They wanted to confirm a few biographical details before publishing the exhibit materials for a collaborative show. The artists were listed as the McCarthy sisters. My breath caught. I stared at the name of the exhibit. Duality. Sisters in contrast. The promotional flyer attached showed 2 silhouetted figures against a background of abstract color. Below it, in plain font, was my name. And hers. I didn't submit anything. I hadn't agreed to it. I wasn't involved at all. I responded immediately. Politely, but clearly. I was not a part of the show. I had not collaborated. I had not authorized the use of my name or any work. Within minutes, the assistant replied, flustered. Apologetic. Said she would look into it. Said the curator had received files directly from K. McCarthy. I knew that trick. We had the same initials. It was just vague enough to cause confusion, just bold enough to go unnoticed until the last second. I sat there staring at my screen, trying to slow my breathing. Not because I was afraid of losing something again, but because I was afraid of what I might do now that I wasn't the silent sister anymore. I contacted the curator directly. Sent a formal letter with timestamps, proof of IP addresses, previous incidents, and even a notarized declaration of copyright. Then I called Nyla, my lawyer friend. She said, "You ready to stop being nice?" I said, "I stopped being nice the day she made a mural out of my heartbreak and called it her breakthrough." Within 48 hours, my sister was removed from the exhibit. The gallery issued a statement clarifying the error. But it wasn't over, because the damage was already rippling. That same week, a blog post surfaced. A former client of hers had started documenting their dealings. Then another artist. Then a gallery in turn. One by one, people began coming forward. Stories of misrepresentation. Forged submissions.
Stolen concepts.
A Twitter thread went viral. Her name trended. For all the wrong reasons. I didn't contribute. I didn't share my side.
Not yet.
Watching it unfold was like standing on a cliff, waiting for the echo to return. Part of me was sick with it. Not because she was being exposed, but because I still carried the memory of who she was before she started pretending. Before she decided my life was more valuable worn like a costume than lived honestly.
My parents called me.
My mother rattled. She asked if I'd seen what was happening. I said yes. She asked if I was behind it. I said no, but that I wasn't shielding her anymore. My father didn't speak. Not during that call, not for weeks. He had always chosen silence when discomfort arose. Maybe he thought that was safer. Maybe that's why this happened at all. A month passed. Then a letter arrived. Not an email. A handwritten letter. From her. 12 pages. No apologies this time.
No requests.
Just a long, raw confession. She wrote about feeling invisible. How she hated being the lesser one. How she knew, even then, that everything she took would rot from the inside out. She admitted to what she did in full. Names.
Tactics.
Even the scholarship. She explained how she had seen the rejection letter in the mail and hidden it from me, editing it herself before giving it to our mother. She wrote, "I thought if I stole your life, I could finally matter." The line that broke me was this: "You were always chosen by teachers, friends, strangers, and I thought if I could become you, I'd be chosen too." She ended with this: "I'm going away. I don't know where yet, but I'm going to stop using your name to build mine. I just wanted you to know if I could go back, I would have asked to be your sister, not your shadow." I sat on my balcony, the letter in my lap, the breeze tugging at the corners. I didn't know what to feel. Vindicated?
Sad? Numb?
All of it, maybe. She had written it. Not posted. Not marketed.
Just send it to me.
And somehow that made it more real than any staged apology ever could. But the next twist came not from her but from Joy. Joy was a young artist I had mentored during my travels. Bright-eyed, thoughtful. She had stayed in touch through messages, asking about my projects, sharing her sketches. Then she sent me a message. "Your sister reached out to me. Said she could represent my art." My stomach turned. Again. Even after everything, she was still trying to climb. Not with my name now, but with my students. I asked Joy to send me the messages.
She did.
I read them all. Full of praise, subtle manipulations. "I understand what it's like to feel unseen," she wrote to Joy. "I've worked with big names. I could help you get exposure." There it was, the old pattern, polished but still rotten. This time, I didn't stay silent. I wrote a public statement. Not angry, not accusatory, just the truth. I told the story, mine. How my name had been used without permission. How trust had been manipulated. How art, something that should lift people up, had been turned into a tool for erasure. I didn't name her directly, but anyone who needed to know knew. The response was overwhelming. Messages from artists around the world. Some who had been through similar things. Others who just wanted to thank me for speaking. Galleries reached out with new opportunities. Invitations to speak at workshops. Host residencies. It didn't feel like fame. It felt like being seen, finally, for myself. A year later, I opened my own studio. Not a big one. Just a sunlit room above a bookstore in Florence. The walls were lined with student work. A long table with brushes and pastels. A quiet corner for coffee and conversations. I ran it like a lighthouse. For artists finding their way back to themselves. I named it Verita.
Truth.
Sometimes people asked me why I didn't press charges. Why I didn't sue. Why I let her go. And I always said the same thing, because I didn't need to destroy her to be free of her. She did that on her own. The last time I heard from her was another letter. This one much shorter. Just 3 words. "I'm in rehab." No return address. No explanation.
Just that. I didn't write back.
I didn't need to, because I had already chosen my path. Not revenge. Not silence. But clarity. I had been erased once. Now, I was engraving my name onto the walls of my own life. With ink. With art. With the truth no one could steal. Time has a strange way of reshaping what once felt unbearable. The studio above the bookstore had become more than a workspace. It had turned into a kind of sanctuary. Not just for me, but for others, young artists passing through Florence, carrying scars no one else could see. I didn't ask them to explain. I only asked them to create. And somehow, in the smudged paint, half-finished canvases, and the quiet moments between tea and twilight, healing found a home. But peace doesn't mean the past stays buried. It means learning to face it when it knocks again. I received a call one morning as I was sketching a concept for a community mural in Venice. The number was American, unfamiliar. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, another call. Then a text. It was from a woman named Marla, a counselor at a residential treatment center in Arizona. She said she was working with my sister. That Serena, she'd started using her full name again, had listed me as her emergency contact. I stared at the message, not sure whether to feel insulted or honored. After everything, I was still the fallback. Still the one they reached for when everything else failed. The counselor's voice was calm when I finally called her back. She said Serena had been admitted under her own will, that she was attending group sessions, that she'd started painting again, but only in black and white, that she was keeping to herself, but she asked about me often, never expecting a response, but hoping for one. I didn't know what to say. The counselor didn't push. She just asked one thing, if I'd be willing to write a letter. Not to save her.
Just to speak.
Honestly.
Clearly.
It took me a week. I sat at my desk every night, pen in hand, unsure what tone to take. I didn't want to pour salt into healing skin, but I didn't want to gloss over the fire either. On the 8th night, I finally began. You stole my name, my future, my voice. But you didn't destroy me. You forced me to find myself outside of you, outside of the approval I spent years begging for. And somehow, through all of that, I found a version of myself that is no longer afraid of being forgotten. I wrote for 3 pages. I told her what she had done. Not cruelly, not dramatically, just truthfully. I told her what it cost me. And then I told her what I had rebuilt. The students. The murals. The photos. The nights I cried. The mornings I chose to stay alive in my own skin. I ended it with a sentence that surprised even me. If you ever want to know who I really am, come see the studio. But don't come as a sister. Come as a student. I mailed the letter. Not tracked. Not certified. If it got there, it got there. A month passed with no reply. Then one afternoon, while working on a mosaic with a group of teens from Naples, I saw her. Just standing there. Outside the studio's glass door. A backpack slung low on her shoulder. A paint-stained hoodie too big for her frame. Hair tied back in a loose knot. She looked like a shadow of someone I used to know. But this time, there was no performance in her posture. No false pride.
She didn't wave.
She didn't smile. She waited. I didn't open the door right away. I looked at her, then back at my students. Their heads bowed in focus, tile pieces clicking gently on the table. The light was warm, soft through the window. I realized then this was no longer a story about her. It was about what I was going to do now. I opened the door. She stepped in, quiet, unsure. The students looked up, curious but not invasive. I led her to a stool in the corner and gave her a sketch pad. Said nothing. Just handed her a pencil. She blinked once, then nodded. For the next hour, she drew in silence. She came back the next day. And the next. We didn't talk about the past. Not directly. But I watched her shift. She never asked for special treatment. She helped clean brushes. She stayed late without asking. She didn't post a single photo. Didn't tag me. Didn't use my name. And when a student asked if she was my sister, she simply said, "No, I'm learning." One night, weeks later, I found a new canvas tucked behind the others. Her work. A self-portrait. Rough but raw. Not a likeness, but a feeling. A woman made of pieces, shattered and sewn back together with thread. One arm was reaching upward. Not in triumph, but in effort. Underneath, she had written 2 words. Still trying. It undid me more than anything else she'd ever said. But the real twist wasn't her transformation. It was mine. Because one day, as I was prepping supplies for a children's workshop, I got an email from a foundation. They had reviewed my work, heard about the studio, and wanted to fund a traveling program. Mobile art classes across Europe, workshops in underserved areas, scholarships for young artists without resources. And they wanted me to lead it. There was just one catch. They wanted to feature my personal story. The whole story. The scholarship theft. The identity erasure. The rebuild. They said it would inspire others. They said it would add narrative depth. I stared at the screen, conflicted. This wasn't just my story anymore. Exposing it would mean exposing her. Again. I printed the email and handed it to her. She read it twice, quietly. Then she looked at me and said, "Tell it. Tell it loud. If anyone asks about me, tell them I'm the reason, but you're the voice." She didn't say it with shame. She said it like someone who finally understood the cost of silence. I accepted the offer. 6 months later, I was standing on a stage in Amsterdam, a spotlight soft against my face. Hundreds of young artists in the audience. Some smiling, some weeping. I told the story. I told it all. From the scholarship to the mural. From the betrayal to the rebuild. I told them about Verita. About second chances that don't erase first wounds. About how justice isn't always revenge. It's choosing truth when silence is easier. The applause that night wasn't for revenge. It was for survival. Afterward, I flew back to Florence. When I walked into the studio, I found a note on my desk.
No signature.
Just a line in her handwriting. "This is your story. But thank you for letting me be a chapter." That night, I lit a candle. Not for her.
Not even for me.
For every version of myself that had ever been afraid of vanishing. I was still here. And I wasn't done writing. The touring program grew faster than I expected. In less than a year, we held workshops in 12 cities across 5 countries. Old classrooms with peeling ceilings, abandoned libraries, town halls where kids brought chalk and energy instead of brushes. They called me the Wander Teacher, always arriving with a suitcase full of color and leaving behind walls full of stories. The studio in Florence ran on its own now, with volunteers and former students guiding the sessions. Serena stayed on, still quiet, still steady. She never tried to lead, never tried to explain, just listened,
just helped.
But life has its own rhythm, its own way of testing what we've learned. It happened in Athens. One of our youth programs caught the attention of a documentary filmmaker. She wanted to shadow us, capture the students, the art, the energy. At first, I hesitated. I'd spent so long reclaiming my voice, it felt strange to offer it up again to someone else. But she was thoughtful, gentle,
and honest.
I agreed, under one condition, that the documentary not be about me but about the process, the transformation, the way art could restore what shame tried to destroy. She filmed for 3 weeks. Then, one evening, as the sun melted into the Acropolis behind us, she turned her camera off and asked, "Would you mind if we included a segment about your sister?" I froze. "She's part of your story, isn't she?" I nodded. But the idea of putting her back in the spotlight, even indirectly, felt like picking at a scab that had just started to heal. I called Serena that night. I told her about the film, about the question. She paused on the other end, then said something I didn't expect. "If you erase me now, you're doing the same thing I did to you." I didn't answer right away, but her words sank deep. It wasn't about punishment anymore, or exposure. It was about honesty. If the documentary was about rebuilding, then truth, even the ugly kind, had to be part of it. So, we included her. Briefly. A shadow in the story. Her face never shown, her name never spoken. Just a few shots of her helping a child trace a stenciled fish on a school wall in Seville. A voiceover of me saying, "Sometimes, the people who break you are also the ones who make you stronger. Not because they were right, but because they forced you to choose yourself." The documentary made the rounds quietly. Film festivals, art conferences, online platforms. It didn't go viral. It didn't trend. But it reached the right people. Donations flowed in. Partnerships expanded.
New cities joined the map.
And most importantly, I got letters. From strangers. From women. From artists. From former shadows who had never been allowed to speak. One letter stood out. A girl from Istanbul wrote, "My sister took everything. My clothes, my words, my space. But now I paint like I'm reclaiming oxygen." That was it. That was the full circle. Not revenge. Reclamation. Back in Florence, the studio had grown. We now had 2 more floors. A digital lab. A rooftop mural space. We called it the archive, where students could leave behind one piece of their art as a way of documenting their journey. Some left sketches. Others poems. One girl embroidered a heart on a pillowcase and wrote, "I didn't know I was allowed to take up space until now." And then came the letter from our mother. It arrived in a floral envelope. Her handwriting still delicate, though slightly shakier than I remembered. She said she watched the documentary. Said she finally saw the gap she had helped create. The one she ignored. The one she fed. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't defend herself. She simply wrote, "I thought I was keeping peace by keeping you quiet. But silence is not peace. I'm sorry." There was no return address. Just a pressed flower between the pages. A faded purple one from the garden we used to play in. I sat in the courtyard that day, holding it like something sacred. Because even if the apology came late, it still mattered. Not because it changed the past, but because it acknowledged it. Serena continued to grow, too.
Slowly.
One piece at a time. She started attending a program in Rome for late-blooming artists. She began writing poetry. Not to publish. Just to heal. I read one once, folded inside a sketchbook she left on the shelf. It said, "I spent years building my name on borrowed bones. Now I'm learning to walk with my own." And then came the last twist. The same art school, the one that offered me the scholarship so many years ago, reached out. They had seen the documentary. They were revamping their alumni speaker series and wanted to invite me to speak. Not as a student, but as a guest of honor. The irony didn't escape me. The place I was never allowed to enter now held a door open for me. I flew back home for the first time in 4 years. Walking onto that campus was surreal. My shoes clacked against polished floors I'd only seen in brochures. My fingers grazed bulletin boards I used to stare at online for my small library job. And now here I was, in the lecture hall, lights overhead, rows of young artists in front of me. I took the podium.
Paused.
Looked around. Then I spoke. Not about the betrayal, but about choice. About resilience. About how the world will sometimes give your dreams to someone else, and how you still have the right to chase them anyway. How stolen beginnings do not mean stolen endings. And how the most powerful art we create will never be in galleries, but in the boundaries we build and the truths we protect. When I finished, there was silence. Then applause. But it wasn't the noise that stayed with me. It was the stillness before it. The breath held between my last word and their reaction. That was the real moment. That was the healing. I walked outside after the event and found Serena waiting by a tree. She didn't say anything. Just smiled, quietly, like someone who knew her place now and didn't need to push beyond it. We walked together for a bit. Not as enemies. Not even as friends. Just 2 people who once shared a past and had finally stopped trying to carry it alone. As we stood under the soft dusk sky, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid, one of us, from when we were children, covered in finger paint, faces beaming, unaware of the storms we'd one day weather. On the back, she had written, "You always saw the world in color. I only knew how to take it. But now, I'm trying to learn how to give it back." I kept that photo. It's on my studio desk now. Beside a small plaque that reads, "This space was built on reclaimed ground. For voices that were once stolen. For art that refuses to disappear." And just like that, the story that began with silence ended with something stronger.
Truth.
On my terms. Forever.